Hi, this is Samuel Jones from Let's Debate USA. Now, I just want to take a minute before we get into the subject of today and remind people that this is a channel that's dedicated to obviously debate, but in a calm, civil way, where you can leave a calm comment. You can say, if you think I'm wrong, that's completely fine. We can actually talk about it, but don't sit there and cuss me out, for my opinion. Um, so let's just have a calm conversation about it. And if you disagree, hey, that's totally fine. We'll talk you know, and see what we can get to. So, getting into today's subject, it is about medication and vaccines. And I kind of wanted to talk about this subject because I actually have personal experience with, this sort of stuff. And so I want to take a minute to actually talk about my opinions about it, but also talk about my history on it and, what this stuff has done to me. And so, let's take a minute first and talk about my history with it. So, when I was born, obviously I got the kid vaccines, the stuff they give kids, babies and all that. Well, of course, my parents didn't realize, about all the stuff. My mom knows a whole lot more today about how bad vaccines, how bad medication can be. And I do too. I've done my research on more of it. And um, so, you know, after getting that, vaccine, well, I got one of the side effects. And it was a slow growing tumor, brain tumor. So as I get older, um, when I turned about 6, well, then I started to have limitations with my right side of my body, arm and leg. And so my mom rushed me to the hospital and they found a brain tumor in there. Um, and obviously, I had to have surgery and it continued to affect my life. And my whole right side, is not the same. Well, after a little while, I actually had a seizure after that. Not too long after it, but after I had the seizure, the doctors put me on a medication. And, there was no, hey, let's just do it for like a year or so. It was pretty much at that time just like, hey, for the rest of his life, with no end in sight. So I start taking the medication. I take it for, a good long time. Well, then I get to be older, you know, I'm like 16, 17, and I start to have side effects of this medication. And you read about these side effects that happen, and everybody, kind of just glares at it. And it's like, oh no, it couldn't happen to me. This medicine will help me, you know, it'll do more good than bad for me, which is not, you know, the case a lot of times. It actually does more harm than good. And, so I started to have side effects of it. And, I realized that, if I remained on the medication, as I got older, I would probably be on more and more medications because what happens is they assign you medications and then you start to get the side effects. And so now they're like, oh, here's medication for that. Oh, here's medication for that. And then it just continues for pretty much the rest of your life. And so we don't realize how much effect it can actually have on us. And, you look at people today, you know, I'm not giving doctors, you know, I'm not trying to be mean to doctors. I know that doctors are just doing their job and they are just doing what they were taught in school to do. So I don't blame the doctors, but I do blame the higher ups, the people that actually know, this stuff isn't great for us. And it's one thing to take it on a short term, it's another thing to take it on long term. So when I decided to stop taking it, well, this wasn't just something you could just up and, not take anymore. Like, my body got so addicted to this medication that it took a long time to try to get off of it. I had to move down just slowly on the doses. And I finally got off of it, and I've been off of it for quite a while now. And, you know, I feel better than ever. You know, I feel better than I was ever on that medication. I have not had any issues. No, none of the issues, I had after my brain tumor and I started taking the medication. And it just, you know, it just made me see how bad the medication can be for us. You know, we don't realize, you know, we're just like, oh, the doctor said, so I got to do this. Well, you should actually do your research on this medication. You should actually research, there's a lot of natural things out there, things that are not going to hurt your body. And yeah, I mean, and some people think too that, oh, this is an addiction. This is just, if I come off of it, you know, um, this is what happens. No, you come off of it, that's addiction, because it is going to be really hard. Now, in the long term, you'll be happy about it, but in the short term, it is going to suck. And but we don't realize it is addiction. It is, you are addicted to that. It is like any other kind of addiction, like vaping, smoking, drugs, like anything. Trying to come off of that addiction is very, very difficult. And I'm not trying to sit here and tell you never take medication again. I am trying to sit here and tell you do your research. A lot of people do not do their research. And they wonder why they have so many issues. But the reason they have so many issues is because of, the medicine, the side effects, all that. And, and they just keep getting worse and worse and worse as the time goes on. And, you know, what is supposed to happen is you're supposed to be able to walk into a doctor's office and leave healthier or leave with your problems fixed, but you don't. Pretty much when you start till the time you die, you are always. I would love to see everybody's bills on medication or any kind of doctor stuff. You spend a lot of money on, all those doctor stuff. And, you know, and you would think, oh, hey, they're going to help me, this isn't going to, cost, but it isn't that way. You know, we need to realize, we need to start doing research. It's funny because when you buy a car, do you do research on the car or do you just listen to the dealership tell you this is an amazing car? This is the best car you can get. Or do you actually research the car? Do you be like, okay, how is it in reliability? How is it, um, for different things like that? Most of the time, like me, I research the vehicle. I make sure that I am getting a good purchase. Same thing buying a house. When you buy a house, do you just take the word of, you know, the people selling the house? Oh, this house is great. It has no issues whatsoever. Or do you actually hire an inspector to come look at the house? And, so I just want you to ask yourself these questions. You're like, should I start researching? If you do the research and you find this is your best bet, then go for it. If medication is your best bet, go for it if you've done your research. But a lot of times people do not do the research. And, you know, that's one of the things that really irritates me. Now I get it. I mean, obviously, I used to be that kind of person, but I'm not anymore. I've done my research. You know, I know what can help me and what can't. And and I'm not saying all medication is bad. There's some that is good. There's some that, I think if you're on the verge of death, or if you're looking at it and you have no other choice but to take the medication, like you have looked at all your options and there's no other way to go and you're going to get way worse, then yes, I say go for it. But, if you just have a simple little issue, I and there's actually other stuff out there, more natural things, you know, you might want to, actually think about, hey, maybe I should try these natural things first before, I go and, get on this drug that I can be addicted to and that can cause many other issues. Um, so I just urge you to do that research. Um, like I said, I'm doing better than ever after I got off my medication. Um, it was hard. It was very difficult because I was addicted to it. But in the long term, I have been happy that I decided to do that. And, same with vaccines. I don't trust vaccines. I haven't got a vaccine, in a long time because, I don't trust them at all. That's the reason I started off with the brain tumor. And, you know, I just urge you to do that research, figure out, hey, um, is this the best choice for me? You look at, there are so many people on medication today, and there are so many people that are so unhealthy, have so many medical issues, have so many, and you're wondering why. If they're on all this medication, why do they have all these issues? And and this also going back to my comparison of buying a car, buying a house. Those things aren't as important as your body. This is something that can change your life. This is something that, if you take it, it could change it for the better, but it could change it for the worse. And if you buy a car, obviously, like, you spent a lot of money on it, or buy a house, spend a lot of money on it. And if it starts to have issues, yeah, it sucks. But, it's not as important as your body. And, I just, you know, I just look at it like, you know, anybody I see that is on medication, I mean, I haven't hardly ever seen people that aren't on medication that are doing better than if, they weren't on medication. Um, you know, everybody has medical issues. And you go into schools, like when I was in school, everybody had an issue. Everybody had a medical issue. And you're wondering why. What does this take us back to? And I think, you know, 50 years ago, you know, we didn't have as much medication. We didn't have vaccines and all this stuff. And people were a lot healthier. Now, there are, obviously, um, some people live longer than in the older days. But let's just talk about 50 years ago. I mean, you didn't have all this. You didn't have, as many medications. You didn't have as many vaccines. And people were a lot healthier back then. If you look at all the medical issues that you see in schools today, not even close to as many people had all those medical issues. And you take yourself back and you're like, what has changed since that time? What has, you know, what have we done to change that? And the only thing that it brings me back to is medication. We have had so much more medication since that time. And I mean, there's pretty much medication for every single thing you can think of nowadays. And they're coming out with all, new stuff too. Stuff, for like headaches and all that and painkillers. And I get it, pain, it sucks, but there's a reason your body tells you, there's pain. You know, there's a reason you have that, oh man, this hurts. Well, let's figure out why. And then we can discuss the medication. That's another thing. Doctors do not, most doctors, I'm not going to say all of them, but most doctors do not figure out the exact or the reason why something is happening. And you think about it. If you have a headache, let's say you go to a doctor and you're like, yeah, I have a really bad headache. It's terrible. It hurts so bad. And they're just going to write you off some pain prescriptions. That's pretty much it. They're not going to figure out, well, did you bang your head into a wall? Or was this just something that came up just randomly? Like it wasn't hurting this bad before. They're not going to figure that out. And that's what happened too when I was younger. You know, after I got that kids vaccine stuff, well, then I can't remember what it's the name of it is, but it was something like it was really inflamed right here, all down here, and really bad. And so we dealt with the doctors. I don't remember it because I was like 3 at the time, like I was young, so I don't remember it. But and they had so many issues, like you know they couldn't figure out, like, because they gave me prescriptions, they gave me stuff to try to take it away, but they never figured out what it was coming from, and it was one of the signs that I had a brain tumor. And if they figured out then, maybe I would not be at the place I am now physically. Um, and everything happens for a reason. So I'm not going to sit and be angry at the doctors for that. You know, maybe it's good. Maybe I should be at this place now. But I'm just asking the question, why did they not figure out what was causing this issue? And, that's what irritates me is most doctors do not figure out what that issue can come from. They're not going to sit there and be like, well, they're going to sit there and be like, okay, how do we get that gone? How do we figure out how to get that gone? They're not like, why did that come up in the first place? Because to me, everything has a reason. And so why did that come up? Why, you know, what in your what is your body trying to tell us? Because the body is a complicated thing. The body isn't, this stupid thing that just randomly stuff, hurts. Like there's certain reasons. And, so I need to figure out why this happened. And, there's other medications that I have the same issue with. Now, there's some that, like I said, there's some that don't. There's some that they do more good than bad. But I think a lot of medications do a lot of worse than good. And that's why I urge you to research. Like depression. This is a bit of a, difficult subject for a lot of people. But I want you to think about, if you're depressed, why are you depressed? What makes, you be depressed? And so I want you to think about that and think about, you know, like, I feel like if you're depressed, you need to figure out why. Not take, medicine to get rid of that depression and just bottle it up and throw it away. No, you need to figure out why you're depressed. So I urge you to do the research. I urge you to look at more natural ways to do stuff and figure out if this is the best way for you to go, if this will actually help you in the long term. And, just figure that out before you actually get on the medication, you know. And doctors will sit there and tell you, oh, this is great, this will help you. But doctors are trained to prescribe you medication. They're not trained to find natural ways. And I think we have a lot of natural ways to do stuff. I replaced my medication with natural oils, doTERRA oils. So and it helped me a lot, and it makes me feel a lot better than worse, and it's all natural. And I urge you to see see if you can find a natural cure. See if there's something that will, help you and not hurt you. So I know this was a long video, so, but it is something that I have personal stuff with. I have, a history with it. And, so I just want, people to do research on it. Um, if it was you or your kid or anything, just do the research first. Then you can make the decision. Um, so, leave me a comment. Let me know what your opinion is. Remember, nothing mean. Just let's peacefully, peacefully debate. If you disagree with this, if you think, what doctors say is right, let me know. Let me know your reasoning behind it. Let me know that stuff. But do it politely, do it, nice. Um, and yeah, and subscribe, like the video, um, and hit that follow button, you know. So I will see you later, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.